Hello, this is Warhav 1985 speaking today's British review. As you're doing a commemoration video of obviously the recent retirement of HCC788. The best way to describe him is the Wendigoon of G.I.S. reviewing. Not only is his retirement quite shocking in the sense that, although yes, it does make sense, he's been doing reviews for the past 10 years. And then it's pretty much a good time for him to consider retiring, and of course he did retire. He announced it, I believe it was a couple months ago, and it was quite jarring to hear it, but also can't see it. And also seeing how his role as being figurehead of the G.I. Joe reviewing world, and also passing the torch to Half the Battle and Timmer, it's quite jarring to say the least. Especially since he previously held the general title as being kind of the figurehead of the G.I. Joe reviewing world, not only holding his own widespread events, that being Cobra Convergence, which I originally wanted to sign up for, but I couldn't really do it because I didn't have much time, and also I couldn't really kind of commit to it. But I would just more or less consider this my love letter to Cobra Convergence as a event, but also a commemoration video to HCC788's retirement from YouTubing and also general G.I. Joe collecting, because he also started selling off all his collection, which is also another shocking point, especially because he also gave away his Mickey Mouse Cobra Commander to Half the Battle, which is most certainly shocking turn of not necessarily events, more or less just goes to show that not only he's committed to not retiring, but also committed to pass his torch. It's most certainly just shocking, to say the least. Especially since he held the torch after Hornbeak's 2007's retirement also, where he kind of retired after COVID. We don't know sure what happened to him, but it's most likely he just retired from YouTubing in general, social media stuff. But ever since that, it is quite, as I describe it, kind of very intriguing. Especially since HC788 is big inspiration for myself and all other YouTubers. We just said earlier about he is kind of like the Wendigoon of G.I. Joe YouTubing. Is that similar to Wendigoon is that he also does very large complex videos, so looking at every single bit of subject. He also does everything when it comes to G.I. Joe, since he not only collects modern and also vintage G.I. Joe, he also collects kind of the middle of that being modern and etc., which I must collect modern stuff. I also collect vintage stuff also, but it's just very expensive and kind of a lot since vintage stuff, because it's very big and also very pricey. And of course, I'm discussing a vehicle that not only is part of his name, which is HCC788, which is the number for his tank, is also very much the favorite vehicle of Half the Battle, and also obviously HCC788. Of course, we're talking about the original. Oh, there goes the first version. His tank from 1983. All three versions. Of course, you might argue that might be missing some of the regional versions of the original H.I.S.S tank, especially certain versions that are actually entirely brand new, serial codes or rare stamps, etc. Even plastic quality is different, but not really including those, especially versions like the black variant Hyena tank, because that is super rare. And this is reaches out to other things I'm not including regional versions or even the more recent HasLab classified H.I.S.S tank. I'm mostly talking about the original 1983 variants, and also the modern, more recent back H.I.S.S tanks, comparing all of them, showing off the differences, how constantly they evolved and improved on the faults of those original mold, and also kind of streamlined it, especially with the more recent Retro Collection version that came out back in 2020, which is 4 years ago, which is shocking. Very, very shocking. But yeah, I'll now be getting to it, starting up with the first version of the H.I.S.S tank, released back in 1983. And for context, the reason why this H.I.S.S tank is so very unique compared to other H.I.S.S tanks is mostly just because all the original H.I.S.S tanks had different numbers, that being either they were more based off the concept art, they were made to be unique, or they're made to be more noticeable and not as, well, like pretty much don't exist. In this case, it has to be the 1983 HISS tank, the first version, or the early type. As you can tell, the numbers are not very apparent, but that is because it is your normal 788 in numbers, but it's transparent and has just a simple red outline. But this does not really show up that well on the HISS tank because the red outline does somewhat fade over time, and thusly it becomes harder to notice, especially compared to later versions, especially the melee version with metallic. Now it's metallic, which is just the white of the HISS tank's number set. This will all be changed later on, and if here's why it was based on. Almost why this even the way it was in the first place is because it's based on concept art. Concept art from the prototype, and also that prototype is technically used paint, whatever. The point is that it's based on concept art and the prototype HISS tank. Because of that, it kind of has that strange, kind of very unfinished look. Now, this could be just because of factory reasons, or even like they tried to brush this out because Hasbro didn't repaint the edge and would particularly succeed. And then overreached, however. Generally, their expectations were gravely kind of like too low for such a toy line that much to last for about kind of like 40 years now. Of course, because of this, this hasn't returned any more HISS tanks, unlike other number sets like the white and the most popular red numbers. Now, of course, this is a personal kind of like a soft spot in my personal collecting kind of heart, because I actually kind of like it. It's very unique and it's not really sure that often in the core vehicles, and also it is technically reused a couple times. Because this idea of using outline numbers instead of like full and colored in numbers has been used several times, either in silver outlines, black outlines, or even red outlines as well. The only problem is that a lot of those were misused or either weren't used properly. And a lot of them were used a lot better than this, because obviously those don't fade over time. But of course, it's very, very, very much kind of your standard HISS tank compared to other variants, etc. Of course, this copy is a little, not necessarily worse for it, but that has some of the problems that the original HISS tank usually suffered from, which I will get into much later when we discuss the other versions. But I'm mostly just showing myself as this being the first HISS tank to be ever released, and the first kind of like early model also. The second version, that being this one, which is probably the best condition I have, and as you can tell, it does have the driver, which I'll be discussing a lot later. But I just want to show off the another difference, which is numbers. Because again, the majority of these HISS tanks are mostly defined by their numbers, instead of like other details like drivers, etc. The numbers are obviously changed to a being colored in, but also swapping out the red outline to a white outline. This will also be updated again for the melee version, which will last for like a while. Started out back in 1985 with the leftover stock from the original HISS tank, and then also Australia stock by later on, especially when we reached the 1991 point, which is where that melee offer eventually ended. Besides that, it is virtually the same HISS tank. It shares the same body mold. Nothing has really changed. It's just it has updated numbers to frequent just pop more. It doesn't really have a problem with fading or whatever. The final and last one is probably the hardest HISS tank to get. So the vintage HISS tank is the white version. Now this is the early type of the middleweight HISS tank. You can tell because later versions would use leftover stock from Australia. And this is particularly seen on the bottom part the HISS tanks, just like little, I guess it's the body of the HISS tank or the chassis, whatever. Below its chin, you can find like all the little details, whatever. And this says right here, made by Hasbro, 1983, etc. So this basically applies that this HISS tank uses leftover stock from the original HISS tanks molds or whatever from 1983. Because of this, it has much better plastic quality. Because if you don't know, all three of these HISS tanks have a problem, but much later when it comes to body design, whatever. But as you can tell, as I mentioned before, the numbers are virtually the same. It's just similar to the red ones over there, where they use a white outline. This one uses the red outline, the original colors, but colors it in with white. Necessarily, kind of was a silver white. It shows up silver on camera, even in person, but it's just white, like a very, very off-white. You can especially tell with the white stickers, because these are white stickers. It's just they show up as silver or gray sometimes because they're on like a black surface. Now this is also technically the worst kind of conditioned HISS tank I have, and that's because it's just very dirty. Has some missing stickers here and there. Has some stickers misplaced because the GH7C supposed to be here on the rear fenders, and also the tow hook sticker is supposed to be where the tow hook's at instead of the front where it usually is on the retail version. And also, most evidently, the headlights are inside the HISS tank instead of on the actual space where the headlights should be. It's also missing the 3 Cobra emblems here and there, but is ultimately in good condition, especially since a lot of these melee versions are very, very hard to find in good condition. Mostly just stability wise. Also, this HISS tank is missing, I believe, what sticker is missing? Here it is, the little mini HISS tank emblem that's on the chin of the HISS tank. That's missing. And so is like this one, which I think it's missing it's missing the little V logo here. Well, this way it has them. Of course, these HISS tanks are pretty much the same all around. It's just the numbers are different, and even like production. Best to describe it, capabilities or even molds are also changed, plastic quality, etc. But ultimately, they're virtually the same. It's just the one difference is that they have different numbers. But here comes the big difference compared to the much more modern black HISS tanks, which I first start out with the 20th anniversary version. Now, the 20th anniversary version amazingly bases itself off of the HISS tank from the melee version with the white numbers, but they started off this trend where they remove the white outlines from, or just outlines in general, from the original HISS tanks. The outlines would ultimately still be there, but only like in, better to describe it, exclusive sets and for like aesthetic reasons or whatever. But ultimately the outlines were gone. It's just a solid number. And also, it technically reuses some sticker pieces and whatever from previous HISS tanks, like the HISS-3, and also, what's it called again? The Crimson HISS, both the Torsios version and the Jokon version. I'll get on to the body types and etc. Later, but I'm just going to show the numbers. Yeah, this point. Of course, the red numbers would eventually finally reappear with the Retro Collection version, but the Retro Collection version goes for a lot more of a vibrant color scheme, especially when compared to the original HISS tank, where once again, as I said before, it just simply like reuses some of these stickers from the HISS-3, but on the normal black HISS body, or even if it's not necessarily black, it's more like gray, whatever. But in general, the numbers are a lot more vibrant, and once again, do not have the outline. And also, the stickers are much more higher quality and don't necessarily wear that easily compared to the older ones, where although, yes, they're very sturdy, but other versions, like especially the melee version, as you can see right here, and here. I just move the character like this. Definitely like fray a little bit. Come off very easily. I'm being version without my layer version because I do not want to mess with it any further because it's quite fragile. But ultimately, yes, it's virtually kind of the same numbers, but it's just a lot more vibrant and also without the outline. The final like number set is obviously the H.I.S.S tank Megatron, because this is always transformable version of the H.I.S.S tank. It's also based on the version 2 or version 1.5, version 2, whatever, the second variant of the H.I.S.S tank, or the late type. This H.I.S.S tank is obviously based on that version, and also has its own unique quirks. Like, once again, this is more based on the original H.I.S.S tank, but instead of relying on the much more vibrant colors of the Retro Collection version, it relies on a lot more duller colors of the original. Although, yes, this may seem quite cumbersome, this is mostly because I had to get into some crazy camera movement and general shenanigans to show off the play features and also the details and etc. of the H.I.S.S tank. Of course, I'll be using the Retro Collection version because obviously my 3 H.I.S.S tanks obviously suffer from the ratchet joint on the turret being obviously damaged and thusly not being very useful for that particular segment of the video. So I'll be using the Retro Collection version because why not? Of course, you also have the foot pegs, which are obviously suited for much more modern figures, as you can tell with him being a lot more smaller. Trying to get the camera angle correctly because this is quite cumbersome, especially for my tripod, which is a little bit too large for my little studio or my camera space, whatever. As you can tell, it just fits in there quite nicely. This figure. You can also see the figure inside the turret. And as you've seen before, you can see a figure inside of the, and then get this done by using one singular hand. You can also see a driver inside the cockpit, which is quite nice. Other details of the H.I.S.S tank mostly rely on simple play features of any normal G.I. Joe tank. However, this only includes like tanks that don't really use electronics, like the Mobat and also the Mauler. And also technically, does the Iron Panther use, no it doesn't. I'm thinking about the Pit, but that's technically not really a tank. And also the General, but still, also not really a tank. It's more of this base. So, this thing can obviously roll around. Most of the units, obviously, once again, the others are quite fragile, and I'm going to be particularly one to mess with those. Off here, the turret can also rotate 360 degrees. So yeah, pretty standard tank shenanigans. The turret can also move up and down. It can technically go further down, but obviously it's not supposed to do that because it has a blocker to prevent breakages, because the original one did not, and that is basically the reason why a lot of those original ones broke so easily. In recures, no, the treads do not move. That's mostly an exclusive thing that was particularly prevalent with the H.I.S.S version 5, or technically the H.I.S.S version 6, because it goes the 1983 version, the H.I.S.S 2, the H.I.S.S 3, the H.I.S.S from it was called Valor vs. Realm, I believe that it was that H.I.S.S 4, and the H.I.S.S 5, which is technically the DTC version, because it is a canonical H.I.S.S tank. You actually see it in the much more modern ARAH series from IDW when it was still on the run before the license was given to Skybound, more Image Comics. And also finally the H.I.S.S 5, which is obviously see its canon inside the ARAH series, and which is technically H.I.S.S 6. and H.I.S.S, which is from the Retaliation, which also is technically canon to the ARAH series, but that's mostly just a fact, technically. But once again, that's mostly it for play features and game considered the HISS tank. And nothing really that important or even more or less that impressive. However, it most definitely just gives the bare minimum to any kid back in the 80s, and especially now, because this is from 4 years ago, and that means a kid out there has this, which is most definitely saying that this thing's now 4 years old, even though I remember seeing this in stores. Whew. Man, time does fly. Well, then that's all for this segment. So I'm moving on to figure comparison on the various HISS tanks and also the HISS drivers that were released separately. Now, the only odd one now that doesn't really have a unique HISS driver is obviously the HISS Megatron, because it has Baroness as the driver, similar to the situation with the All Striker, where instead of having Crankcase, it's Stalker, and instead of having what's his name again? Thrasher, with the Sound Wave Thunder Machine. It has Zartan and Zorana, weird fix, but also Ravage as well, which makes sense, but still. These figures are either exclusive to their HISS tanks or more just come single carded. In this case, I'm mentioning quite an interesting kind of like evolution of the HISS tanks drivers, how they just slowly get taller until we get to the Retro Collection version, which is the tallest HISS tank driver we currently now have, and excluding like the the Hainia tank driver, which is Red Jackal, and also the HasLab classified HISS drivers and Gunner, etc. But ultimately, it's quite cool, nonetheless. Of course, I'm first talking about the original HISS tank driver, which I only have just one because I was able to get other HISS tank drivers for the other versions of the HISS tank. Things I own. But ultimately, this show do for now. Let's move these figures on the ground because these figures love to topple over. Now, the HISS tank driver is infamous in the sense that I started off this almost wasn't the figures that had the problem where the silver paint will easily rub off. This is probably the best HISS tank driver I could probably show you if I were to like buy other HISS tank drivers that has the HISS nice logo, but the Cobra logo almost like intact, but it's missing like some parts here and there. Most just have the outline of the like Cobra logo. As you can tell if I just move around the figure, just show that it's there, but it just barely. But the figure does use your standard 1982, not 1992, but 1983 articulation with the swivel more battle grip, etc. Has a swivel head, has hinged shoulders, hinged elbows. I'm very gentle with this because it's very, very fragile. Not to say the figure is fragile, it's just more just I'm being very careful with it because I don't want to working it. A O-ring waist, decent kick forward and back, and a very nice knee bend. Also, the figure can use standard G.I. Joe ARAH foot pegs, which are on the vintage HISS tanks and also the HISS tank Megatron. However, I don't recommend using the HISS tank Megatron because it only particularly works with Retro Collection O-ring figures, and also I think the Super 7 versions, if I'm not mistaken. However, those haven't come out yet, but I won't be sure if they are compatible with those figures as well. Of course, in comparison with the 20th anniversary version, they're relatively the same size. That's because the 20th anniversary version uses the same general body that was from the HISS-3, which itself was slightly modified, but still same body or chest, whatever, of the original HISS. So they had to be kind of like the same size, or relatively the same size. But yeah, very nice update. Much more of a cherry type of a soft red. And also you had the HISS Commander, which did come with the 20th anniversary HISS tank, but this figure is obviously not based off the original HISS tank. It's more or less based off my previously reviewed, but also you can tell if you've seen that review from the 12 Days of War series I did, the figure does look pretty snazzy. Almost is based off of Ribbit, the his leader or his commanding officer, whatever. But yeah, it's just based on that figure. The Retro Collection version, which is right here, also very nice update to the original, and it has much more similar shade of red compared to the original one, but it's not as like cherry or kind of like it's not much of a cherry red compared to the original one. It's more of a, let's describe it, I don't know, a soft red, a rose, I don't know, but it's most definitely very close, very close. Look very nice though. It has the same like paint decals, or more just placement, even down to like how there's just no paint on the back. It's so funny. And finally, the last driver, even though it's not technically his driver, it's more, it's just figured that was deemed to be the driver to his tank Metron back then, whatever. The point is that this is Baroness Retro Collection version, or the Retro O-Ring version. So yeah, it's just the Baroness. Nothing that special. Of course, it's its own unique thing because it's more based off the cartoon instead of the original toy. Well, this is obviously the original toy, so of the his driver more or less, but still weird though, very weird. Of course, I forgot to mention that there are like details like how they were able to capture the original his drivers, which were rounded off armor plates, which is weird because the original, like almost the 20th anniversary version, has more squared off. So that's a interesting update to these figures from the Retro Collection figure, more or less. Of these his things, which is just the stability. Of course, over time, stability has most definitely increased and has gotten a lot better, but also the original his things are definitely suffering from just not just their old age, just poor design. Because his tank was mostly designed for a just be affordable, but also to be very just cheaply to make. Because again, it's army building vehicle, and obviously you want to make this vehicle to be cheaply made, very cheaply to produce, etc., etc. Problem with that is that this led to a lot of problems. As you can tell from a lot of the vintage HISS tanks, which I bring to close into frame, a lot of them have their turrets drooping. This is because that the original HISS tank had a major problem where either over time or just to like Bear's play, or the kids just thinking that, oh, I don't want to have my HISS tank just shoot down at the Joes, so they have pointing downwards. They unintentionally snap the ratchet joint and just break it, or just wear down over time. It is most definitely an inevitable like thing where the ratchet joints will eventually break down, just not work anymore. But most of it just sucks, and you can't really do anything about it. The problem with the chassis, particularly the body of the HISS tank, not necessarily the chassis, but also mixed with both. Because I'm using my, let's see, I think I'll use this HISS tank as a good example. The as you can tell, you can see that there's some slight differences when it comes to the HISS tanks here and to here when it comes to the body. Like, it has a much more larger chin, the fronts are a lot more pronounced, most just sticker details over, but also you can tell that, I could just get this open up here, the diamond plating on the seat is not there in the original, but here On the 20th anniversary version, it is. This is also just because this body was fixed for another problem, which is the turret, which I mentioned earlier. Because also, the turret will have a problem where the teeth would break off. The boost has started with the... I'm trying to get it out here to show it to you guys. Let me just grab onto the turret here. Be done just a second. I just need to find the keys. There we go. So as you can tell, the HISS tank uses, Mars original HISS tank uses 2 teeth to hold the turret together, while the much more modern HISS tank body mold use 3 teeth. This is because of, apparently, I didn't know this, but this is actually very, very hard to find, but it is a problem. The teeth will literally just snap off, or just simply wear down. And obviously these HISS tanks will rattle inside the turret or even fall out, causing the arch joints to break off, or even the turrets to break off. Because not to mention, these turret blaster bits will break off, just snap clean off from the joint. And you can find so many listings, so many listings on eBay, which made this review take forever just to do. And I'll mention this later because the melee version, mind you, for me to find the turret just intact. This is the biggest problem with just collecting the original HISS tank, or even collecting all the HISS tanks, mind you, because not only they're obviously they're very expensive, but also they're very just fragile. They're very, very fragile, even though they're supposed to be designed for rigorous play, etc. Also, the reason that the chassis was changed was for the windows. So if you don't know, the original windows were designed to basically open up like this. You kind of jiggle it around to get into place, which was most certainly a design philosophy. This is because, if I can just get it the right angle here, and I can get it out here. But basically, the original canopy, unlike the new ones, where I can tell they're most definitely very different molds. Not only by how much smoother this is, but also kind of a stopping point. While this one necessarily doesn't, it just keeps on going. It also has a little hole there, for I guess you can just simply have it to open up like this, however. In general, it's much more improved, and because of that, it's also redesigned for that reason. This is a really good idea because the original one, because it, instead of relying on just this little, not just dumbbell joint, but like a dumbbell joint, to just kind of move up and down like this. This one kind of relies on, yes, a similar dumbbell joint, but rather as a stopping point with like a little thin, kind of like plank on the HISS tank's canopy window. I'm trying to show you that particular detail, but it's quite hard to get it out. You kind of get at a certain angle comes with these HISS tanks. You can get it and do this one. Yeah, I think it's going out. Maybe I can just show you like this. Maybe this one. I hear this. Okay, so let's see if I can get my flashlight in there. Alright, after much time, I can finally show this weird quirk. Okay then, so the original HISS tank had the problem where obviously this little plank will pretty much break off, and here you can see it. It's this little transparent piece. I think you can see it. I don't know. Is that piece right there? You see the little line right there? It's that piece, okay? So the problem is that this piece will just snap off, and the canopy will just not work. It will not work at all. It will just fall out, and it's pretty much done for. the original HISS tank had this problem, and obviously I believe it was like HISS-3 fixed this problem, and it was just which is what the 20th anniversary version uses, and because of that, that's why the HISS driver is so small, etc., etc. Because of this, it obviously leads to this HISS tank just breaking down very easily and just not working. Especially, it's very stressful because a lot of these HISS tanks are super fragile. The canopy over time can get so like fragile and brittle because it's clear plastic, and clear plastic breaks down a lot faster than normal plastic. Means that the canopy is somewhat of a ticking time bomb, and you kind of have to be super careful with it, just super careful. And I'm not stressing that it was terrifying when I found out that the melee version had even worse problem, because this is a problem with the original version also had, because how like thin the plastic was for the canopy, unlike the newer versions would fixed up by making it a lot more rigid and thicker, is that sometimes this is true. Sometimes they'll be warped, just ever so slightly warped, because how thin they are. As you can tell, it's just ever so slightly warped on this side, and because of that, it has such a hard time clipping in there that, to be honest, it is absolutely horrifying whenever I had to like open and close this thing. Just pretty much be like very careful, because you have to get into like a certain like angle for it to work, because it just kind of just slides in there because the melee version. And it doesn't really help with the other problem with this HISS thing has. I'll just do it later because I can barely see through this camera. Which is the wheels. Because over time, this is true, over time, these wheels will snap off. And I have no clue why. I have no clue why these wheels just snap off randomly. Either because of old age or just straight up the wheels just made with much less quality plastic. The wheels just straight up just snap off. As you can tell with the 20th anniversary version, or also the HISS-3 version, they made the wheels a lot thicker, and also made the tires, and also especially the rods that connect to the treads inside of the chassis, while these are a lot thinner because they're much easier to break. This is obviously had led to another problem, which is the connection to the chassis and also the body of the HISS tank or the cab. Because so many people think like, oh yeah, I can just crack this thing open and replace the wheels. No, you can't do that, because you're just gonna break the chassis and just pretty much ruin your HISS tank. Because I have an example of this. Because the seller who I bought this thing from tried to replace the wheels. He did, but ultimately meant that this HISS tank had the clips that connected the chassis to the body, but was just broken off. As you can see right here, I was able to glue it on there, but I'm pretty feel proud of that, because gluing on like a vintage toy is kind of like the last resort you're gonna have to do. But I was forced to do this because I either had to hunt down a chassis that is not broken, which is impossible because those are either mint out of the box chassis, which are not that very common. They're in fact super rare. It only be found in like the melee versions, which are even harder to find. Which moves on to the next problem with the HISS tank, the melee version. Because if you don't know, early versions, as I said beforehand, were mostly just using the original HISS tank body. Just the original HISS tank's body made by Hasbro here in like the United States, and also in China, whoever they just read these things, whoever. The point is that this led to another problem, right? This led to another problem with the original HISS tank. It had the problem where, for some ungodly reason, almost every single HISS tank that was made either by Estrella, which is a Brazilian company in South America, or any other company, because a lot of the later versions from 1991 and 85 and beyond were made by Estrella, etc. They use those that were stock and shoved into the melee version. Remember? Because of that, they're super fragile. Super fragile. And it's so common to just find a cannon piece for those later versions broken, find the turrets absolutely destroyed, or especially the wheels. The amount of times I found the wheels on the melee version broken is insane. It is insane how common this is to find the melee version with just broken wheels. I am so lucky and fortunate to find or buy a early version of the melee version to just review for this video or to show off and just tell you that that the early version is the best version you can get. It's the best version you can get. Problem is, it's super very hard to find. The only reason I got this thing for cheap was just because the stickers are mostly missing and are in terrible condition, whatever. But ultimately, it is the best option you can get. But make sure to have it with just the 78 logo and you're pretty much okay and fine, whatever. Because again, the only thing that's been differentiating this from the other version is the 78 logo. But whatever. It is something that is prevalent and it is super hard to find and it's super hard to just kind of work with. Of course, this also leads to the various just sea of absolute redesigns and also improvements that later versions have. Obviously, the first improvements that I mentioned beforehand were the wheels for the treads and also the turrets. However, the turrets were also redesigned again for the US Collection version, because this is obviously reusing the turrets that are new and exclusive, whatever, just brand new for the history that was released back in 2000 for the 15th anniversary of G.I. Joe at the time. And it kind of uses kind of that weird gonk droid. If you're gonna handle the vintage gonk droid from the original Star Wars one by Kenner, kind of use that kind of like ratchet joint. As you can hear, and because of that, it sounds very creaky and it kind of sounds like it's gonna break. It won't. It just sounds very funky. And of course, because Hasbro is pretty much the king of ratchet joints, especially when it comes to Armada stuff. Armada's it's just all ratchet joints. They eventually updated it again with the Retro Collection version, which is probably by far the best hissing you can get, because it is pretty much the most perfected version you can get. It fixes pretty much has all the problems from the original version just fixed, but also has the hindsight of the of course Transformer stuff like that, and also the hindsight of the 25th anniversary version, because of course that one didn't really had that particularly not just the 25th anniversary, more just the 2000 history turret, where it was revised and made a lot more sturdier, especially because it was made of much more softer plastic, which means that this thing will not break. And also, this also leads to other things like how over time they also changed the H.I.S.S turret section to be a lot less detailed for some reason. Over time, they removed a lot of little details or add on more details on the original version, which was continued onto the version of the H.I.S.S 3, and which was then continued onto the it was excluded by the newer version, which obviously uses the updated or has created the more recent updated version of the ratchet joint, where it's a plastic ratchet joint. Very similar to the Transformers, etc. A good example would probably kind of similar to Titans, where they kind of use a much of a softer joint for elbow joints and etc. So it's kind of like that basically, but on a H.I.S.S tank. Because of that, it's a lot more durable, and I don't feel like it's going to break soon. Also, it once again retains the much more sturdier canopy and canopy design of the H.I.S.S 3 and also 25th anniversary H.I.S.S. And also finally you get to the H.I.S.S tank Megatron, which within itself is not necessarily related to any of these H.I.S.S tanks other than just design. However, I really do like this update with the H.I.S.S Megastron, where instead of relying you on squeezing the H.I.S canopy for it to open and close, or instead it uses a little tab here which opens and closes. Genius engineering. I don't know how the hell nobody else thought about this, but this is a great idea. Just great idea. But ultimately, the vintage H.I.S has gone through many changes, because all these back H.I.S are obviously based on the original H.I.S from 1983, are pretty much all universally unique and good in their own ways. The original H.I.S is good because it obviously has that added fun factor that you can get pretty much all these different H.I.S by I don't know, being lucky or just being fortunate. Like majority of the H.I.S I got for pretty low prices. These two I got for like $20 in the regular version, because the sticker detail being incorrectly placed or even just slightly damaged. I was able to get for like, I want to say like $13 or $15. Really nice deal for the early tag, which is super rare. But also just because that's just not the driver. But with the driver with the early type, etc. Super rare, hard to find, also very expensive, etc. But ultimately, I do recommend all these H.I.S, especially the much more modern versions, if you don't really want to worry about the shenanigans with the vintage versions, which are, once again, super fragile and super confusing, to say the least. Of course, that was all for this review and general commemoration to HCC788. Of course, this is quite a lot in me discussing the vehicle and also discussing some of the problems that the version H.I.S kind of has. Because again, I really do like the H.I.S. I love the H.I.S, but I'll most definitely point out the problems and the reason why I think we're in a really good spot when it comes to H.I.S. Especially with us getting like a absolutely beautiful H.I.S the classified version, and also a absolutely amazing H.I.S to somehow surpass the original, which is the Retro Collection version version over there. But ultimately, that is all for this review. I guess like, comment, and subscribe. And hopefully I should see you next time. And most definitely, if HCC788 does really see this, which probably won't, but whatever. I definitely thank you for giving me inspiration for for creating videos and etc. And inspiration for pretty much everyone on the YouTube platform to just have the confidence in general. The love of G.I. Joe, because HC788 and also much other YouTubers pretty much gave me kind of like a lot of inspiration and kind of like a drive to further collect more G.I. Joe figures, accessories, and vehicles, especially the vintage stuff. Like, for example, my favorite kind of like 1987 vehicle, the Cobra Mamba. I was actually really wanted to get it because of Michael Mercy's review on it, and the reason why I really wanted to get the original H.I.S was because of HCC788, because I was super like interested in getting it, but was really like so far like I kind of found the Retro Collection version, the original version, and then until I saw the review by HC788, it fully convinced me, brought me on board to just getting the thing, which I now have all three, which is most definitely achievement. But yeah, that's all for this review, and I'll most definitely see you next time.